How to Destroy a Republic. This is a warning from the past. Try not to be pulled into the language of monarchy. It will be easier to think of it more in terms of an aristocracy or ruling class. Basically, the political class as we understand it today. Please keep in mind, this was originally written in the late 1700s. I will be reading from the original text, as well as trying to convey the meaning into modern language as best I can. As we go on this journey, you may notice that many of these steps have already been taken and employed. That alone should scare many of us. We must also keep in mind that some of the concepts and language involved may seem ancient or archaic to us. But do not lose sight of the fact that, for the most part, people are the same now as they were then. We must also recognize that the standards of education have been lowered to the point that most of us can no longer grasp concepts that were common knowledge at the time this was originally published. At the end of this series, I will post a link to the original text so that everyone may have access to this information, and not only be able to spread this warning from the past, but to also be able to explain the steps and concepts that are contained within it. Also, for those that are students of history, you may notice that many of these steps have been implemented since the emergence of the modern progressive movement over the last 100 years. We now embark upon this journey into darkness and depravity. Step 1. It being necessary in order to effect the change, to get rid of constitutional shackles and popular prejudices. All possible means and occasions are to be used for both these purposes. Meaning, to be able to change the political structure and remove the restrictions within the Constitution, as well as the general dislike of an aristocracy, being the political class. Efforts must be made to weed this sentiment out of our culture, and that every opportunity in which the political class can expand their power base must be used. Kind of reminds me of Rahm Emanuel in his quote, "We never let a crisis go to waste." Anyways, step 2. Nothing being more likely to prepare the vulgar mind for aristocratical ranks and hereditary powers than titles. Endeavor in the offset of the government to confer these on its most dignified officers. If the principal magistrate should happen to be particularly venerable in the eyes of the people, take advantage of that fortunate circumstance in setting the example. Okay. Here we go. In order to get the general population to accept the concept of a ruling class, public titles of authority should become commonplace and viewed as normal. Request that the government places its most popular personalities in positions of authority that require such titles. If the local authority is popular amongst the public, then use that person as an example and hold them up to be emulated, obeyed, and respected. Kind of sounds like a cult of personality to me. On to 3. Should the attempt fail through his Republican aversion to it, or from the danger of alarming the people, do not abandon the enterprise altogether, but lay up the proposition in the record. Time may gain it respect, and it will be there, always ready, cut and dried, for any favorable conjuncture that may offer. Wait, that one was a little difficult. Okay. If the person you are trying to recruit for such a position refuses to go along with it, mainly out of fear that the people will discover what you are doing and act to stop the power grab, don't give up. Keep the paperwork on record. After some time and the mentioning of the concept from time to time, opinions may change given enough time. If attitudes change after a while, the paperwork and structure is already available to be used with another popular public official. Yeah. Now it really starts to get creepy. In drawing all bills, resolutions, and reports, keep constantly in view that the limitations in the Constitution are ultimately to be explained away. Precedents and phrases may thus be shuffled in, without being averted to by candid or weak people, of which good use may afterward be made. Personally, I believe that most people can understand this part. This is where an uneducated public comes in. I also believe that this is why so many of the bills that pass through Congress are so long and convoluted that the common man can't understand them, and therefore the common man does not care. This step, or rule, explains why context matters, and why we can't let government slip any special language into any documents or proposals. By the way, did anyone else notice the reference to useful idiots at the end? 5. As the novelty and bustle of inaugurating the government will for some time keep the public mind in a heedless and unsettled state, let the press during this period be busy in propagating the doctrines of monarchy and aristocracy. For this purpose it will be particularly useful to confound a mobbish democracy with a representative republic, that by exhibiting all the turbulent examples and enormities of the former, an odium may be thrown into the character of the latter. Review all civil content, convulsions, factions, broils, squabbles, bickering, black eyes, and bloody noses, of ancient, middle, and modern ages. Caricature them in the most frightful forms and colors that can be imagined, and unfold one scene of horrible tragedy after another, until the people be made, if possible, to tremble at their own shadows. Let the discourses on Davila and contrast these pictures of terror, the quiet hereditary succession, the reverence claimed by birth and nobility. Let the fascinating influence of stars and ribbons and garters, cautiously suppressing all of the bloody tragedies and unceasing oppressions which form the history of this species of government. No pains should be spared in this part of the undertaking, for the greatest will be wanted. it being extremely difficult, especially when a people have been taught to reason and feel their rights, to convince them that a king, who is always an enemy of the people, and a nobility, who are perhaps still more so, will take better care of the people than the people will take care of themselves. Boy, that was difficult to get through. Here we go. Use the showmanship of politics and the rituals of government to keep the public's attention. Then use the press to promote and advance the ideas of the political class. It is important to display all of the problems that are the hallmarks of a pure democracy, while at the same time employing critical theory to violently point to the perceived sins and hindrances of the republic and its culture. Analyze all of the social ills of the day and present them in the most graphic, hateful, and fear-inducing way possible. Once again, we see the implementation of critical theory. Use the public's internal bickering and fear of the oppression and evils of the current culture and compare that to the prospect of what peace and prosperity that a true political class can offer. All the while diverting attention from the horrors that such a political system has brought onto people of the past by use of the media. No expense should be spared in the implementation of diversionary tactics, for when a people know and feel their natural rights, to convince them that a ruling class, which is always the enemy of the people, will take better care of the people than the people themselves, is always a difficult task indeed. This concludes the 5 steps that I'm covering in this video. Now I'm sure by this point in time, some of you are going to have to watch the video again to try and separate out the original text from my translation, and I apologize if the translation wasn't the easiest to follow. But I find it interesting that a number of these steps we see essentially every 4 years. I also find it interesting that with Section 4, that the limitations in the Constitution are ultimately to be explained away. We see this over and over again. When we hear a politician try and say, well, we don't know what they meant when they put this in the Constitution. But we do. All of that is explained in the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers give context to the Constitution. This information is there. And we see this concept of it needs to be explained away. Every time we try and make an argument, well, they really meant this, or perhaps they meant that. And then we have, well, it says in this law over here, this little section, page 287, Appendix C, subsection 2, paragraph D, or some other crap like that, where it says this, and it's always like a 1 sentence or 4 word portion that they are directing us to. These are the little snippets that are slid into the language of our laws and policies. This is the danger. And this was explained to us over 200 years ago. Thank you for listening. This video will be followed up by 2 others. There are a total of 15 steps. So, this was the first 5. Please leave some comments. But more importantly, try and understand what this man was saying. Thank you.